Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Currier. I'm the president of Water Congress this year. And first of all, I think this was billed as the President's Luncheon, but I have to say that that is a complete fallacy. This luncheon is, I think, dedicated to the gentleman here on my left, who, for the most part, need no introduction. So while we're enjoying the rest of our dinner, or our entrees as they may appear, I'm going to just turn the mic over to Ted Kowalski from the Walton Family Foundation to head up this discussion. So sit back and enjoy, and let you take it away, Ted.
Thanks, John. My name is Ted Kowalski, for those of you who I haven't met. I run the Colorado River program for the Walton Family Foundation and have done that for the past 3 years, and prior to that worked for the Colorado Water Conservation Board with John Stolp and others, trying to work on interstate and federal issues, trying to improve the situation for the state of Colorado. And I was involved with Colorado's first water plan and the establishment of that water plan. And I want to introduce this topic with Russ George and John Stolp by describing briefly, who the Walton Family Foundation is, and I get that question a lot of what's their interest in water. And they have a deep connection to rivers from growing up in Arkansas, going rafting on the Buffalo River, and many of them have adopted Colorado as their home, and they recognize that Colorado River issues are critically important to the state of Colorado and to the entire southwestern United States and Mexico, and are dedicating their philanthropic resources to help solving these problems. And we do that through grants, we do that through convenings, much as the one that Russ and John are going to talk a little bit about, where we can identify a problem, and certainly we don't have all of the answers, or all of the solutions, but we can bring people together to talk about the problem, see if we can't garner support for commonalities or common goals around those solutions, and that was what we were hoping to do with this conversation that we formed with the Gates Family Foundation. The Gates Family Foundation is located here in Colorado and focuses on issues within Colorado, such as education, healthcare, water, natural resources, and the like. And it was a co-joined set of conversations that we formed to explore this issue around funding for implementation of Colorado's water plan. Before I hand it over to Russ and John Stolp, I just want to add my thanks to John Stolp for his many years of public service. We were really lucky to work together at the Colorado Water Conservation Board, but subsequently as well when I moved on. And John is just an epitome of what you want in a public servant. So please help me thank John for his service. With that, I'll hand it over to another public servant of many years and a mentor of mine, Russ George.
Thank you, Ted. It is very nice, and it's an honor for me to once again share a podium with John Stolp. And since we've started going down that path, I want to add just a couple words. I can't remember when we first met. It's been a long time ago. We crossed similar paths on different sides of the state. We're same generation, about the same age, coming at it from different directions. But over all these years, it's been an honor to serve with you in the governor's cabinet and in so many other ways. And the nice thing is that I can always know that the very best, decent, honest work is being done when John Stolp's in the room. So thank you, John, once again. So our little bit of time today is going to be mostly spent on two subject matters that really matter to me in particular, that we bring into convergence. One is collaboration. The other is money. They're both equal in this conversation. And what we've been trying to do with this particular project that we're laying out a bit for you today is to use the art of collaboration in yet another successful way across the entire state to talk about the singular issue that is required for preserving life and quality of life as we know it, and that's our water across the state of Colorado. So I want to set the stage for how we get to this conversation at this moment in time. Water, like anything else in human activity, always has a beginning, and there's always a history, and I believe it's always important to acknowledge the connecting pieces in history that we then rely on to begin to know how to resolve the conflicts of today. And oftentimes you have to pick a place in the line of history to really say, okay, this is the piece of the foundation we're standing on for the work of today. So I think the work of today can really go back at least as far for this conversation as, say, the early 2000s, maybe a little bit before that, when we started working across the state on SWASI, State Water Supply Initiative. I think that's where we really began to say two things. One is we really need to concentrate on a data-driven analysis for all of the things we want to do with water in the future. Of course, it's a time when the whole world was beginning to figure out. It's what happens when you begin to do your thinking at the speed of light with computers. And so because you have computers, you can now churn information in ways we've never been able to do as fast before, and so data became the drive. And of course, the decision was made, the data needs to be collected everywhere, including at home, on the ground, where life is, where the action is. So the strength of the first SWASI effort was to go out into the countryside, form roundtables, and talk to the local people. That's its strength. And of course, SWASI continues today at higher, more sophisticated levels, and we're going to be standing on the SWASI data when we start making choices about going forward with whatever we're going to do to solve our water problems in the near and distant future. So SWASI was so successful and had started such an imaginative, positive approach that we then decided to enlarge the scope of the conversation, and so we then decided to build the Basin Roundtables with some permanency. So in the mid-2000s, we go right back into the communities and say, okay, we would invite you to come to your community table and talk about your future in water. And we only ask two things of you. Tell us what it is you need in your community that may be related to water, maybe be something else. But what is it you need? And do that together and then come back to us and answer one more question. What are you willing to give up to get what you need? And that's the essence of the work in the roundtables. Then the other thing we did, once we started getting that feedback, is we said, all right, now we're going to empower you to begin to do something about filling your needs. We'll talk about how you're going to pay for it another day, but in the meantime, we're going to try to let the people of Colorado help pay for needs. And so we had some money accumulated at Department of Natural Resources, accumulated from severance tax, and this has always been the purpose of severance tax, is to be reinvested for the future in natural resources. And we'll begin to use the public's money to help build these projects all across the state that will help the communities to thrive for years on end. And so, in the meantime, while we're doing this and using the resources we have available, other things beyond our control happen. The population continues to grow. It's doubled a couple times in Colorado in these years we're talking about. And for this discussion too, the population is growing faster and larger in many of the states that are downstream from us, where they want to share our water, or we agree to share all the water. And so the pressure of population is everywhere. And then in recent years, we finally figured out that something's happening in the world at large. We're calling it by a couple names. Climate change is the one that's probably least political. It's real, it's there, it's drying up the West. All of this is happening at the same time we're trying to figure out how we work together to solve our water shortage problems. We've always worked together in Colorado to solve our water shortage problems, but most of the time we were talking about how we divide up what we have and make more and use it better. But now that is even more intense because it appears there's going to be less of it. So once again, here we come full circle together to say we can't do everything we need to do without more money. We're exhausting all of our resource dollar flows now. We have to do more. Now there's an alarm out here. First of all, that time is shorter than we ever dreamed it was, and the people that are in competition with us, let's say Texas and the Rio Grande discussion, let's say all of the Colorado River Basin states, they are spending enormous sums of money to use the water that we also are interested in. And so we finally understand we can't nickel and dime this thing for ourselves. We've got to have real money. Now, when California says they need real money, it's tens of billions for water development. When Texas says, of course, Texas, right, they do the same thing, tens of billions of dollars. All we're asking for is $100 million. Well, but that's okay, we're smaller. But that's $100 million more than we're getting out of current resources. And so it's the hard question, and it's that hard question that we've just decided we've got to have the conversation about. And so it's being done in a very collaborative way, trying to reach around and get as many people into the conversation as we can. But our goal in this particular project is to be ready when the time comes to play ball. Many of you have probably been involved in circumstances where you've tried to help get a statewide tax issue passed for any good reason, and there's lots of good reasons out there. But it's rare, very rare, for Colorado citizens statewide to pass tax measures since 1992, when the voters put Tabor in and required every statewide new tax issue to go to the public. We know how hard this nut is to crack. And so we know we just have to stand up and get after it. We can't duck it anymore. We got to call it like it is. And we want to have a team in place that knows something about the hard political realities of getting a ballot question put together and getting out among the people and getting it passed so that we can protect our water future and therefore our way of life. So that's what we're up to, and our invitation to you is join us, help guide us. We need everybody in this room and about everybody we can think of outside this room if we're going to get this done. So that's what we're up to. We have decided, and I don't want to take time away from John, but I want to tell you a couple of things that we've done. We've talked about what we think the potential funding categories should be. And so let me tell you what those are, and I think you'll agree that they're appropriate. So, healthy rivers, watershed health and water quality, conservation and efficiency, productive agriculture, infrastructure, and Colorado Compact obligations. And then we tried to develop recommended principles for funding, distribution, and governance. I'll just tell you what the principles are, and then I'll let John come up and talk about the collaborative process. We're using the state water plan as the guide, and you recall that the state water plan begins by reaffirming the doctrine of prior appropriation. So at a foundational level, any funding distributed under this program to implement the plan, the state water plan, will be consistent with that doctrine. There's no question about that, and that is how it should be done. So in the end, every dime we raise and spend will respect and protect water rights. Next, statewide stakeholders, including basin roundtables, will continue to be active participants in the decision-making process. Everybody at home in the corners of this state where the action of life are part of the decision-making team at all times. And if funding for a super project that may involve new Trans Mountain diversion occurs, it's got to be consistent with the language in the state water plan about conceptual framework and what principles to follow, and it will be, and all of that work will be honored. Then we want to recognize the interconnection of groundwater and surface water. We know that aquifer health is critical to meeting multiple needs in many parts of the state, and we can't neglect it. We need to consider aquifer health and its role in the larger water scheme. So that's where we are at this point. I think that's a good place for me to break. And John, I'll let you follow up from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Russ, and thank you for the kind remarks. I'd probably be ahead if I would just sit back down and have Russ give his speech again, but you don't get off that easy. So I wanted to follow up on a couple things and put my spin on it, and that so many of you in this room participated in developing Colorado's water plan, and we understand it's a dynamic document that will continue to be kind of a guiding post, but will be dynamic in that we will be constantly updating it and looking to it on how we meet Colorado's water future. And so at the completion of and presenting that to the state on Colorado's first water plan, I think many of us had worked hard and long, and many of you are in this room, but the real work has just begun. We're into the third, fourth year of the implementation, and that's what's going to really make the difference. And now we have a number of new things that have approached us, of prolonged drought, Colorado River system issues, and all those other things are spelled out in the water plan. We had 8 or 9 measurable outcomes, and I think we're making great progress on all of them. But one of those measurable outcomes was how we would finance and how we would create the revenue to take care of implementation. Because as Russ mentioned, we've done all the easy things. We've done all the low-hanging fruit. From this point on, there's going to be a cost associated with this if we don't invest now. I'm reminded of the scenarios that are in the water plan, 5 different scenarios, and we continue to look through that lens of the water plan at them. What if we go into a recession? What if we get into higher population growth than we're predicting? What if we get into a hotter climate? And those of us in the climate session this afternoon, been painfully aware of what's going on there. It's not getting any better. So out of this implementation process, the IBCC, and a number of you are in the room, took on the project of looking at potential funding sources We had a number of friends from the NGO community and the different organizations that also participated and looked at different, had brainstorming activities. Actually, one of them invoked 111 different potential ideas of future funding. And then that was narrowed down to about 10 or 12. And then there's even been some others come up since then. And so the source of this needed income is certainly continuing to be discussed. At about this same time, the Walton Family Foundation and the Gate Family Foundation come forward and said they would like to help assist in this process. And it's been a great relationship, and that the private sector, the foundations have come forward and been able to provide the resources necessary to bring people together. And this initial group of people that come together was represented a broad swath of Colorado water interests: agriculture, municipal providers, NGOs, conservation, recreation, business people, all down the line. And out of that has come some of the comments, the categories in which these new resources would be invested that Russ mentioned. And so it's really important that we continue this discussion. And there's been a smaller kind of management group created out of that to try to continue representing the different interests. There's people like Terry Fankhauser from the Colorado Cattlemen's Association that represents the Ag Water Network of many of the ag irrigators in the state that are on this committee. People like Russ George continue to serve on this managerial committee, as well as members of the two foundations. And so they're looking to continue this discussion. And the IBCC has been an important part of that because of those 6 items that Russ enumerated. 5 of them had come out of IBCC drafts or discussions that we were having among ourselves at the IBCC, as well as with the roundtables. And so out of this, there's been a 6th category, and all 6 of these are consistent with the water plan and are very critical on the implementation of the water plan as we go forward. And so I just want to add my comments that we want to make this as transparent as possible. And you're going to hear more about it, because if we have to go to a ballot initiative, or if we decide to go the legislative route, it's going to be important that we as a water community come together and can agree on these guiding principles and how we're going to invest this money to keep ourselves in the forefront of water and how you administer water in a changing world and a changing climate. Whether it's climate pressures, or if it's population pressures, or if it's a combination of the two, we still have to be respectful of the different economies in our state and how important of a role water plays in those. So we're going to have a few minutes, I think, for some Q&A. And so at this point, I want to thank you for your attention and your participation, and especially your future involvement as we start answering this question of how do we raise $100 million to invest in Colorado's water future each year.
Great. Thanks, John. Thanks, Russ. So as John just indicated, we are going to have just a few minutes of time for questions, and I think there are a couple of mics around here. It's tough to see out here, but
We got over here, Ted.
maybe,
Any questions?
please.
Your left. We'll keep working with him, folks. Any questions?
Oh, there you are.
I think the funding priorities are absolutely correct. Of that $100 million, we don't have a category for slowing down climate change. How do you guys see any efforts in that area being funded separately or out of that bucket? Question mark.
Thank you for the question. As you read through the water plan, I think you'll observe that in nearly every chapter, climate change is mentioned. And there was a discussion on whether it ought to be a separate chapter, but it is intertwined in every part of water, water supply, and the use of water in Colorado. So I would certainly encourage those of you that weren't in the morning session on climate change to attend this afternoon. We're going to spend several hours continuing this discussion on climate change. And so I think it's inherent in some of the infrastructure and forest health and watershed protection that we will be addressing some of those issues are paramount to climate change. And so I think we have included some. $100 million is not going to be enough to do everything that we want to do. But I think it'll help us do those critical things, and climate change will be part of that.
Other questions? Oh, J. Paul.
Thank you. It seems to me that, if you're going to go to the people of the state for a tax increase, that they are going to want to know exactly what you're going to do. And just a suggestion, we're controlling all of the water in every drainage except on the South Platte. And there is water that goes out of the state above the compact every year. And I would just ask what you think about that. And then I think, if you're gonna ask the people of the state for a tax increase, you're gonna have some real good reasons to do so.
I couldn't agree more. The tax-paying public has told us this time and time again, more at the local level than we've had experience at the state level, but the point is good, either locally or statewide, and that is what are you going to do with the money that you raise by this new fee or tax? Fair question, absolutely has to be answered in advance. There's no question about it. I'd be surprised if that wasn't always in any bill that or any ballot question that we would draft. Now, what's going to be in there is a broader conversation. The water plan recognized that there are projects of many kinds and sizes and locations, and the Basin Roundtables spent a lot of their time and effort on developing what those projects are in their basin implementation plans. So that's how the projects that are going to be funded with this money will come forward. Otherwise, there are interests all across the state, whether they're domestic water providers or large industry or agriculture, that are already working on projects. It takes many years, as you know, to plan and develop and permit any kind of project. And there's a lot in motion. And the water plan anticipates that. And so at whatever point we say now, then we'll have the array that is prioritized and ready to go, and it'll be priced to the best of our ability and described. I don't think you can do a ballot question any differently. The other thing we need to do is probably also recognize we have to step up bigger and higher than that and talk about the really big projects that we haven't talked about ever since Bureau of Reclamation quit funding new projects, and we'd never found an alternative source of revenue to do anything big. If we mean business about this, and if we're going to compete with the kinds of projects that are being designed and built in Utah, Arizona, California, if we're going to be able to compete with them to prove that we are taking care of our asset, just as eagerly and well as they are, then we've got to be looking at some very large, heretofore unplanned, unknown projects of all different kinds to be able to better utilize our resource.
Let me make an additional comment that this $100 million a year anticipated for over a 30-year period, $3 billion, is to supplement and to assist and incentivize the other $17 billion that's probably going to be necessary. And the preponderance of that, 70% or so, is going to come from the ratepayers. The other $3 billion in there is coming from existing sources, whether they be federal or state, that are being contributed to kind of at this point. That additional part kind of makes the whole package to come together, and I think we're looking for those projects that show multiple benefits with multiple participants, and then the state can be a facilitator as well as an investor in those projects.
Great. Ted, I think that we're about out of time, so I think our CWCB director, Becky Mitchell, had a comment.
Great. Becky Mitchell.
Thank you all. I couldn't let John Stolp get off the stage without saying just a few words about him. John retired from state service earlier this month, and it would be unfair to the public if I didn't get to say a few words. So John might be the most influential person in my professional life. He shaped who I am professionally far beyond what I could even say. But he's not too shabby at the personal life advice either. If those of you know how calm and thoughtful John is, he gives advice that way also. So while his role in my life is small in comparison to his role in Colorado, I think we know his work on the IBCC and the Colorado Water Plan has shaped our futures forever and many generations to come. But his role even goes beyond that. You may or may not know that John serves as the alternate commissioner for the Colorado River, and the respect that he's gained from both the upper basin and lower basin shows us how we are as people here in Colorado. John exemplifies that all the time. I say this, and I want to let you know that John is not perfect. I spoke to his wife the other day. And I said to Jane, are you so excited to have John home a little more? And have you gotten your honey-do list together? And she said, oh, Becky, I learned a long time ago to just not be disappointed. So, and that being said, while he's not perfect, I think a lesson that as we move forward, I want us to remember that one of the things that John gave us is the most valuable resource that we are protecting is only protected with the human resource, and we all have to come together and be a part of the solution. So, John, while you may not be on the payroll anymore, we still expect you to stand with us and walk with us through this journey. So, I miss you already, and I know all your phone numbers, and I'll hand them out if anybody else would like them either. But and I love you, and I know that's not appropriate, but John knows that I love him. So thank you, and thank you from everyone.